Hello and welcome. My name is Tolu Olafalashe, and with me is
Olu Benson.
and welcome to Decrypting Relationships. And it's a podcast where Olu and I, we discuss various topics about relationships and how to have a fruitful and thriving relationship. Right, Olu?
Yes, that's him.
Fantastic. And so what we're talking about today. Oh, before that, we need to do a disclaimer before we talk, before we decide or before we mention today's topic. So Olu, what's our disclaimer, please?
Oh, well, we're just not professionals in any way. We're not qualified or accredited by anybody of therapists or anything. We're just two people who are passionate about healthy relationships, and we are in two different marriages, and we thought with almost 50 years of marriage experience between the two of us, we probably have something to say in that space. So that's the whole purpose of it. So we're just individuals, we're passionate about relationships, and we just want to share a few nuggets with people.
Absolutely. We're not masters by any stretch of imagination, but we do have a passion, like you said, to see people enjoying the blessing that relationships, is supposed to bring. It's a shame if people, just get it wrong because they're just reading all the signals wrong. So yeah. Excellent. So today we are talking about what, Olu?
The decision.
The decision. That's
I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, what decision are you making?
So tell us, enlighten them.
Just following on from our previous discussions, because like you rightly said, our motto for this podcast is that marriage is a journey. Marriage is a journey. So we're literally stepping through the phases of marriage, of the relationship before it gets to the marriage phase. Yeah. So from our experiences, we are putting things out there. So we've spoken about, you doing a self-assessment of yourself and the qualities that you want, your core values. We spoke about you being ready. We spoke about you prepping, praying, and being alert. And now we're saying, when you're now at the point where you're ready for this relationship and you've prayed, you need to make a decision on who you want to embark on this journey with. So this is the decision that we're talking about. And yeah, as we start or get into it, you'll probably have better insight into what we're talking about.
Yeah, so we're talking, right, we've gone past the dating and, the initial sort of like scoping if this could be the one. And we're now in the point where we're like, oh, wow, I think we have a future together type thing, right? That's the kind of scenario we're talking about.
Yeah, but before you get to that, you still have to do a selection process.
Okay. So you're assuming there's a number of people to select from, right?
Naturally, people have eyes.
I didn't have
a lot
that.
of people eyeing you up. I had that when on my day.
I did. You must have been. I don't know. I don't know. You must have been sort of like a real, what's the word?
Oh, so you just went for one person when you decided, and that was it.
I only had one person in my life at the time,
Oh, good for you. Well, I had quite a few suitors, and I had to select.
And so did you go on a certain number of dates with each one before you selected who to go forward with?
No, actually, back in the day, we were very old school. So the notion of dating wasn't really, at least, it wasn't a generalized thing. Because some people dated. Yeah. But I was very old school in my natural and personal thought process, in the sense that I didn't want to lead anybody on, and I didn't want anybody thinking I was just a user.
Right.
I just laid it out from the outset. And just to give you a quick background into a very interesting part of my selection process, because I had quite a few other people, but the most peculiar one was that when we were after I decided, like I said in the last podcast, and we went into the youth service here.
Yeah.
We usually had 1 month of whatever it was called, service, whereby we were camped somewhere, and everybody in that state will be camped, and then you be there for a month and do some drilling and whatnot. I then happened to find myself in a position where 3 guys came to approach me that they were interested in having a relationship with me. So In the course of days, I realized that these three guys were kind of talking to one another. So I assumed, oh, they must be friends. So unbeknownst to them, each of them had approached me, but I didn't think they knew that they had approached the same person. So when I realized they were friends, I asked the three of them if we could meet, and they just thought we were just playing around and fooling around, and just to kind of joke around in their rooms. I said, I'd like to come and play with you guys in your room and hang out with you. So got there, and I just literally like, guys, the three of you have come to me to say you're interested in having a serious relationship with me. So can you put your heads together and let the strongest candidate come forward, and then let's take it from there. So they were just flabbergasted. I could imagine the embarrassment on all their faces. So I think about 2 or 3 days later, my current husband was the selected person to come forward and see, if, anything was going to come out of it. And that was how it started. And then at that time, with everything that happened in time, I think it took about, in my case, it took quite a bit before I became settled that he was the one. So yeah, so we had a few back and forth, and then in the same time when we left camp, we started working. I still had a few people who still came from my church and different places work, and I just had to settle with one to say this is the one. So that was kind of my summary of my selection process. But I had to be prayerful. I had to be very vigilant, and I also had to make sure I wasn't just clouded by the physical side of things. I was a fine guy and he had all the whatever. I had to test him to make sure those values that were non-negotiable to me were actually, he had. So that was my kind of selection process. Yeah.
Sounds very interesting.
It was.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Mine was nowhere as eventful as yours. Like it wasn't at all. Well, I think it was probably in the earlier discussions that we had. I had moved away from my faith, or I wasn't practicing the tenets of my faith. So I had a few relationships that I had no business being in. And I think in the process of restoring my faith and coming back to bringing order back into my life, I decided, you know what, I'm not even going to date anyone until I meet the person that I believe was my future wife. And I think the moral of the story is everyone's going to have different scenarios, different circumstances around this particular area that we just discussed about decision. So yeah.
But could I just put a little spin on that? Because
sure.
It seems to, from my experience and from some of the people I've spoken with, it seems to be such that it's the guys who tend to know that this is the one. One person just knows. Because if you were to flip the coin and my husband were to sit here, he will tell you he knew. Because when he came to me in camp, he told me he wanted to marry me. So if he were to sit here, he'll tell you he only had one person in his line of sight at the time. And the other two guys were serious too, because they were really looking. So in their world, they'll tell you at the time they only had one person. So it's very interesting that, guys just seem to know, or almost like this is it. And then it's the women who are like, okay, I better be sure. And that. So yeah, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for many men, and I'm not saying women don't have this, but I think traditionally, obviously, a man is the shooter and he's thinking, right, this lady is just, this is my wife. And there's a gut feeling, there's something deep down. I felt that as well, actually, before when I met my wife and we decided to get married. I just knew it felt like, how can I even describe it? It felt so like real, like this is somebody I already knew. I could see my life with them. So I think that's what it is,
So how did the meet really happen then? Where did you meet her? And how quickly did you know shortly after you met her to say, this is the person? Or was it the very first day you met her? Was there love at first sight?
Yeah, that's a good. When we met through a friend, and and afterwards we met up for lunch one time, and I met her at a tube station, bank tube station, actually,
Okay.
Central London. I remember the day very clearly.
Wow.
And that day was just like the very first date, official date type thing. And
Okay.
as she came out of the station, out of the train, and it was just that moment in time. It was as if
Wow.
when they say time stood still.
Well, still, oh dear.
No, and it
Smooth.
wasn't so much. She came. She wore a shirt, like an office shirt with a skirt. It wasn't like
Okay.
she was in a
Mm.
evening gown or something.
Mm-hmm.
She had her hair packed to the back with
She
rubber
just blew
bands,
your
which is
mind
what.
away.
No, there was something very familiar
Okay.
about yeah, just that meeting. You understand? And it's just like,
Okay.
wow, this is a friend. This is someone that
Mm.
there was connection on so many levels. You understand? So
Okay.
so that's what it was. And so I think when since we're talking about decisions, what were some of the things that informed your decisions? Because remember, we were
I was
talking.
just going to hit you with that. You
No, no,
literally,
no. I
you
got you
pulled the
first.
fast
I
one
got
on
you
me,
first.
Tolu.
I
I
got
was
you
trying to be
first.
polite to let you land with your story, and I'm going to hit you a what it is.
Since
Oh,
since
mister.
since
Oh,
we are
dear.
talking about
You pulled a
decisions,
fast one on me on that one.
well,
Anyway, I'll go first.
go first then.
Like I said, I had my notion of what my core values were,
Mm,
and
mm,
one of I think the key one was really being God fearing, but that's not something you could pick up on in an
yeah.
instance. It's something you study over time to actually see the authenticity of their relationship with God and really how genuine they were in their walk with God. But I think the other thing that I told myself was, you know, it was a must to have, or was a must have, sorry,
Mm, mm,
was the heart.
mm,
I am a very generous person. I'm a very giving person. And I just could not imagine my life ending up with a very, very selfish person. And I knew at the time that there were quite a lot of selfish people around. So my thing was, let's start with the little. Let's see how generous it was with the little that he had. Let's see how willing it was to go out of his way to make things easier for both of us.
mm,
Let's see his demeanor, if it was about me, myself, and I, if his vocabulary was always about as long as I was okay. So those were really, those two things, his heart for God and his heart for the people, not just me, because I wouldn't even think, because out of the other two guys that I kind of in the three people that I kind of alluded to, one of the main issues I had with them was their heart when I got to know them over the years, because we're still, the three of them are still good friends. They're still friends. So we still know one another. We know one another's marriages and what that. So it was just the fact that I could not imagine someone who could be mean to people around him. It
yeah.
wasn't just about being generous towards me. He
Mm-hmm.
was the way he treated people around him,
Mm-hmm.
the respect that he showed to people around him. And so it was just that. It was just, yeah. I didn't care if it was poor or anything, because it
Yeah.
wasn't about what he had. Or it was just the heart. And also, in that, I knew it was a driven person.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't going to be a liability as a man in future to say, you know what, I'm just happy with just being mediocre with my life.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that he was someone who was driven, even though circumstances at the time were not necessarily in his favor. But I saw the future and I thought, this was somebody that I could grow with. This is somebody who's driven, who would do anything, not anything illegal, but he will push to be the best that he could in any circumstance, because you have some bums around, people who just don't want to do much, but they want the reward of people who are slugging their guts. I didn't want such a person, because I started to think, how would this reflect on our relationship, and also looking at having children with this person. Yeah. Would I be proud to say this is their dad, or would I be proud to even live with my husband? If people started seeing some not so interesting behaviors from me. So yeah, those were my lookout qualities in him. And just to step into the other area, which you are going to dabble into too. I mean, some of the, not so must have, good to haves. Well, like I was one person that thought, oh, well, I wouldn't want my husband to be bald. It'll be nice to have a guy who has a full head of hair and whatnot. But By the
For
time we
what
go
purpose? For what purpose? If you don't mean
I
to
just
interrupt.
like it was just one of those physical things. I felt, you know what, I wasn't, so I wanted somebody who was taller because I'm a tall girl.
Yeah.
I'm a tall woman now. I'm a woman, so I wanted somebody. I think in my mind, one of the things because of the movies that we watched, then this notion of a girl raising her head to her head up to a man to have a kiss was just beautiful. Like I wanted somebody who was a bit taller than I was, so I could have that. That romantic feel of raising my head. But then I landed with a guy who's just about the same height as I. So that wasn't a deal breaker either because it's just the physical.
Yeah.
I could work with it. But he was a very kind, and he's still a very kind and generous man, even to a fault. And I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world.
Interesting.
So what were your qualities?
So, for me, I think the major thing I was looking for was a partner. You understand, a real partner. And I know it sounds a bit, I don't know, cliche, but what?
Yeah, what's your definition of a partner?
So someone I can plan my future with, because
yeah.
I think if you remember sort of like the earlier discussions we had, I said what drew me to marriage was the fact that growing up in a home, where my mom and dad were divorced and separated, it was a bit of what's the word? So it was something I really wondered what it would be like to be in a family unit. You understand? So I think that drove most of my childhood. And so I got married when I was 29 or 28, something like that. And even into my 20s, I think it's still stuck in the back of my mind, unconsciously or subconsciously, that, you know what, you need to, you're going to build your own family. It's going to be amazing. You're going to right all the wrongs, that type of thing, right? So when I met her, I was looking out that, is this someone who shared the same passion as I to build a family together? You understand?
Yeah.
We would have fun together. We would go on different types of adventures and that kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things I was looking at. The fact that she was a Christian as well, that was also very, very, very critical. Very quickly I found out that Falake was very generous as well. Just like you said, your husband showed a lot of generosity at the beginning. I remember one time I went to visit her with a friend on a Saturday morning, and as soon as we came in, she was on the way out, but she decided to stay, and then she made both of us breakfast, And my friend was like,
"The way to a man's heart, right?"
But the guy was like, "Dude, she's meeting me for the first," and she wasn't even doing it in a way to impress anyone. She just did that. It just came almost naturally to her. You understand?
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Dude, how did you find this one?" type thing. And it wasn't just so. Not only because I know, yes, it's definitely a way to a man's heart. And it wasn't all about the cooking, because I love cooking as well. I used to do it myself. Yeah, absolutely. And I used to, even in early marriage, I used to do a lot of cooking. So it wasn't so much. I was just building life together. We would manage, like you said earlier on as well. It wasn't so much about the means, even if you don't have a lot of means, because means is cyclical, isn't it? There's certain times in life where you've got means. There are times when resources and funds and finances might be a bit of a struggle, but all that will come and go. It's the connection, the friendship, the relationship, building the life together, going through the different seasons of life together. That was the key thing, Yeah. So for me, it was, I was excited by what I'd see. The conversations we had showed me she likes movies, right? And we could talk about different parts of the movies and pick out principles, so that was fun.
I still see that in you.
You still see that in me? Yeah. picking the bones out of
always
movies.
making analogies about some movie that you watched and
Absolutely,
some lesson
absolutely,
that was learned. I'm like, okay, this guy sure loves
absolutely,
his movies.
absolutely. So that was fun as well. That was fun as
Okay,
well.
so moving on to the next phase. So now that you were confident that this was the one,
Hmm.
how did your journey then take off? Because between then and you eventually getting married,
Hmm.
there was a journey. And what were the things that you know took notes to do, and how you then started to understand and see each other for who you really were better,
Hmm.
as opposed to the best leg or the best foot being put forward just to attract, and then you started to settle into, okay, I'm seeing some deeper qualities, or I'm seeing this, or I'm seeing some things I'm not very happy, because they're not always all positive.
Hmm.
There's still going to be some things that probably nag at you, and you think, okay, but how did you manage those?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, one of the things I remember one time we went bowling, right? So, Falak and I went bowling. We went with another couple,
Okay.
and it got to a stage where she was a bit tired. You understand?
Mm.
And I think she'd had a long day. She probably didn't really want to go bowling either, and she wasn't really kind of like bowling isn't really sort of like high on her list. So when it got to this, that I'm very, very competitive, right? So we did the couples things, right? So I was like, oh, we got to get these pins down. I got to get all the high scores. But because she was tired, she would just pick the ball up, walk to the lane, and drop the ball, you know? And I was thinking, I don't
Girl,
think I appreciate you. I don't think you appreciate the situation
what's
that
at
we're
stake
in.
here?
You know, we have to win. Girl, what are you doing? And she was just kind of like, oh man, I just want to let's just finish already and go home, you know? And I laughed about it and everything, but there was something inside of me thinking, um, I wonder how she would react when, maybe when we're in a situation in life, in marriage, where, I'm all fired up, like, oh, let's go. And she's more like, she doesn't share that enthusiasm. You understand?
Mm.
And so I really had to, I just felt, Tolu, are you happy to accommodate that,
Yeah.
and for me it was a no-brainer. I just
Okay.
thought, look, I she doesn't have to have my enthusiasm and my passion in certain areas, because if
Mm-hmm.
I've got so much of that, what I'm willing to do is try and bring the enthusiasm her way, and if she doesn't feel it, then I'm more than happy to just
Mm.
so it sounds like a small thing, but it actually over the years, like when our 20th year, over the
Mm.
years I have seen how there've been situations where I'm like, oh honey, we need urgency, we need to do this quick, we need to win, and she's like, oh man, you're your own type thing, so I've looked now, I'm thinking, Tolu, don't forget, you decided that you
Mm.
would manage this. First and foremost, you would see it from her point of view. You understand?
Yes.
Not yours. Because if you don't see it from her point of view and you see it from your point of view alone, then you will be in a poor position.
Mm.
Stephen Covey said it in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that seek first to understand than to be understood. So if you understand where she's come from, why she's tired, she's had a long day, mentally, she's just really, it's not maybe her thing. Okay, that's fine. Don't
Okay.
impose on her. So yeah, so for me, just there's so many other analogies, but I would like to
Mm-hmm.
hear yours. So that was mine. What's yours? What were some of
I
the
think I think I was, I'm sure I can't say this enough times, for
hmm,
whatever reason or reasons, I've always been this very self-driven and very assertive person from a
hmm,
very, very young age. And it wasn't because I was exposed to anything, because I was a very naive person, which almost sounds very contradictory.
yeah.
But one of the things, because I told you after eventually I settled with Shea.
Yeah.
Funnily, this is the first time I'm actually mentioning his name, considering you've mentioned Falaka's name in almost every sentence, every topic you've dealt with.
I think it's just it's a
I've
bit weird
never
just saying my wife, your husband, my wife, your husband.
exactly, but you say Falaka a lot. This is the first time I'm actually saying his name, Shea.
Yes,
That's his
yes,
name.
yeah.
So I remember, because after eventually I settled with okay, he was the chosen one amongst the three.
Absolutely.
Then it took us almost 6 months for me to actually settle down into, because I was too on. And in my defense, I was a very young person. I'm a very naive person. I got to uni at 14, so you can imagine where my mindset was at when I graduated. I was still very young and very inexperienced. So the notion of this was it, this one guy was going to be it, was like, okay, God, I know you're saying something, but my heart is scared and I'm not sure I want anybody to mess me up. So yeah, we went back and forth, and eventually, I think when it got to like the 6th, 7th month, he had to sit me down to say, Shay, are we moving forward with this? Because 2 weeks were on, 2 weeks were off. I'm breaking up. Oh no, I don't think God is talking. I'm not sure. And then so yeah, eventually we settled in, I think around the 7th, 8th month, when I now say, you know what, let's go for it. And I then realized that about almost 5-6 months into it, we hardly ever argued. We just had the, like, you know, we're always merry. And I started to think to myself, oh girl, this cannot be right. You have to have, because I know myself, I know I'm very, you know, I could be very opinionated if I wanted to be. So to now have a guy who just always seemed to agree with me, and we always, oh, okay, no problem for no. So one day, interestingly, the other two guys who were in the equation initially, the four of us were very good friends up until we all got married and then settled in different countries. So one day, the four of us were together and actually spoke to Shay at the time that, Shay, you know what? I'm going to give you an assignment. Going forward, we need to start having arguments. So I'll know if you're the kind of person who drew a knife or threw bottles when you were mad. And you need to know if I'm the kind of woman who went crazy if I got, you know, misunderstood. So we will be sure we can manage each other's anger and whatever. If he was the guy, thank God he's a black man, he would have gone red. Really a sin. And I said, yes, because this is not realistic. And in hindsight, I'm very thankful for that, because that was one thing that literally then broke the final barrier. So when that happened, we were then able to be honest and open with each other, because then there was then no offense in you disagreeing with my viewpoint. I'm human, you're human, we're both intelligent people. So there will be differences of opinions and so many things. So why not get into the area or into the space where both of you know how to handle such differences before they start turning into grudges that, oh, because you didn't agree with me, then you're probably opposing me. It's a personal thing. So yeah, so that was one barrier that I made sure that we kind of crossed. And when that happened, it literally just opened a very different atmosphere into our relationship, such that we could argue, we were gone, we'll come back, whoever needed to apologize would apologize. And so it became easier to manage. And considering we actually courted after that for about 3.5 years. So, from the time he met me to marriage was almost 4 years. So we needed that. So I was able to be honest with him, and he was able to be honest with me in terms of what he didn't like and what he liked. And so I think that was one of the key things that I'm thankful that I dealt with, because in my walk and from my experience so far, I've met people who've been married for several years, and they tell you they never argued. They've never argued because they didn't think it was right to do that. And then later on, when the pressures of marriage and life started to creep in, it became a very serious problem, because then everything then become an irritation, because they've never expressed their disagreements or any form of the difference of opinion as opposed to in relation to their spouse's viewpoint. So now the pressures were in, and every time they tried to express, because they hadn't learned to do that when they were younger, it then became something very negative, and this is really affecting so many marriages I know in a very negative way. So that is one thing I'll put out there, that try and be as open and as honest as you can be with each other.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, it's about being proactive as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
If what you were, and it will sound strange to some people, but it makes a lot of sense to you, because you were quite calculating about it in terms of, I really need to know how this person reacts in tense situations, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not forthcoming, and you did something which is very crucial. We've talked about that in the past discussions. open communication, just being
Yeah.
brutally honest and say, come on, honey, this is on my mind. This is beginning to bother me. Why are we not falling out on anything, you know?
Exactly.
So,
It sounded evil at the time because I'm sure everybody, you know, the three guys were actually perplexed
yeah,
that you want to
absolutely.
argue. And I knew what I was talking, even though I
What you
didn't
want,
know
yeah.
my facts, but there was just something nagging at me that no relationship is healthy if you don't express the fact that you disagree with the other person. Because even, you know, God who made us, we do argue with God. We have differences of opinion. God is telling you to do that, saying, God, you know, let's negotiate. I don't think that, you know, ties into what I had in mind as to what you're asking me to do. We do that. Exactly. The person, our creator, who sees our hearts, who knows what we're thinking and feeling. We have those back and forth with him. And then with human beings who don't know what's going on in our hearts, we're saying, no, we can't argue. You know, we shouldn't argue. I just think it's very unhealthy.
Yeah. All right. We have very little time left, but I want us to tackle something very important. What would you say, you know, obviously we're talking about the decision, we've talked about some of the things that we looked out for, we even preempted in your case to make sure that these traits that emerged then informed our decisions. Since we're talking about the decision and what informed our decisions, can you maybe give us briefly tell us some of the stuff or things in relationships or in relationships, for example, that you looked at outside of the marriage? You understand, it looked in one particular way, but in marriage, you know, that trait then didn't, you know, it took on a different form in marriage than before marriage. Does that make sense?
I think one of the things, I wouldn't say they're traits. I think they just maybe our personalities and our qualities. Because my husband is from a very large family. He's got quite a few siblings.
Yeah.
I am from a family of 4 children, but I've never really been a maternal person.
Yeah.
I've never cooed over babies. I never dreamt of having 1 or 2 children who will look so cute and they'll be running around. Never.
Which is not very typical of a woman, right?
African women. No,
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Evil. As a woman, you're not planning on, and I never could just think of it. And then I met this wonderful guy who grew up in a family of so many children, and he just loved, carrying babies like they were nothing.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, girl, you better try and broach this. You better start talking. You need to get into all of these areas and make sure you guys have a verbal contract, so to speak.
Yeah.
Agree on the number. Because if you go into marriage and this guy says because it's from like a family of like 10 children and he wants 5, where are you going to start negotiating from? So we agreed to. And thank God we did, because after I had the first one and I saw the challenges because in this part of the world, back then when we agreed, we were courting in Nigeria. So you knew there were helps, you had yourself, you had parents. It was a communal thing to raise a child. And then we came over straight after we got married to the UK. And I realized you are literally on your own. You're the chauffeur, you're the mother, you're the chef, you're the hairdresser, you're the babysitter, you're the cleaner, you're everything to a child. And I had the first one. I thought, okay, I'm not sure I can handle this. And so I started talking to myself, you better, but thankfully, because you agreed to, I had to honor that.
Yeah.
So we waited after the first one, because there's about 6.5 years between our 2 girls.
Okay.
I had to wait to make sure I was psychologically and emotionally ready. And that is why that understanding comes into it. Because culturally, you're meant to literally have children back to back. They tell you it's healthy so they can be playmates. And I'm thinking, the mental health of the children, if I'm not in a good state of health, I will destroy those kids. So I had to make sure, I had to be true to myself and also my husband, honoring our commitment to have 2. And then making sure that as their mother, I was in an emotionally healthy and stable place to actually handle 2 children at once. Hence the wait. So that was one thing that, that was very, very crucial to our marriage, that we made sure we talked about. And then we talked about finance and actually started acting along the lines of what our principles were. But I'll leave that for another time. So you can give us some input into, that area of your marriage in terms of what you thought would be something, because I thought being a mother would be wonderful. And then I had one child, I realized it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
So in your case, what did you propose to do? And then you found out in reality when you're going to marry that, ooh, okay, maybe I need to renegotiate.
Yeah, well, where do I start? Most of it is from me just having this ideal in my head that was most of the time from some kind of fantasy world, you understand? And since you're talking about parenting, I think, because we started having kids very, very, very quickly. We got married in September. And by August of the following year, we already had our first child.
Same here, very similar.
So we didn't. So I mean, I think that was part of. Now that wasn't the surprise in the equation that I was talking about. The surprise in the equation was a little bit our parenting style.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a huge difference. My dad, growing up, my dad used to do absolutely everything for us.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be times when, like weekends, for example, before my sister and I got out of bed, he's tied up the whole house. He's made breakfast. Breakfast is ready. He wakes us, come guys, come and get it. We come down, get breakfast. Then he prepares a bath for us. You understand? That's the kind of father I had. You understand?
Wow.
And so I that's my programming. You understand? So I kind of like have that. And he was just a fun dad. He just was a fun dad. That's all he was. He just wanted fun. So I ended up being kind of like a fun dad, right?
Okay.
And I think for Lake, it was slightly different, right?
Okay.
She came from a home, obviously, there was only two of us, my sister and I, at home. She had she has like 10 siblings.
Oh, wow.
Right. Similar to your husband, right? And I think, obviously when you have 10 siblings, maybe a little bit more as well, the kind of interaction you have with your parents is completely different, isn't it? It's almost like going to the GP and you take a ticket, really, isn't it? to have any meaningful interaction. Yeah, you take a ticket and you wait to speak to a parent, So and I think that really forms your reality, So for like, even though she's an amazing mother and everything, you understand, she wasn't, her approach to parenting was quite different. It was almost like, let me see using the analogy of ticket. What's your ticket? Okay, what do you want? Okay, this is how you do it, and the kids understand, they accept her for who she is. But so when Folake and I have discussions about, okay, no, this is how I would do it, and she'd be like, well, I don't know, your dad was way too liberal. I don't believe. Why would I be preparing bath water for my children?
I think it's very similar to my marriage too, because there's had to be a lot of re-education on, especially my husband's part. Because just in my home, my father was, even though I grew up to find that most children never really sat in the same space with their parents, especially when they had guests.
Precisely.
But I grew up, our parents, my father used to tell his friends, if you couldn't say whatever you wanted to say, this is my kids' home. I will not chase them away from me, which almost made us feel very uncomfortable. Our parents and my father was telling his friends off, like, whatever you cannot say in front of my children, you better wait till we get outside. Maybe when you come to the office.
Were the friends like, go outside, or I'll talk to your dad?
No, exactly, yeah. Like, can you come out? Can you come out, please, so we can have like. And he's like, no, I'm not coming. If you can't say it in front of my children, wait till we get to the office. Yeah. But I will not come out. And then we will sit there and just be gawking at all the guests and watching. You listen and everything. We didn't think it was wrong because that's how we were raised. And then I grew up. I realized that most children didn't have that privilege.
Yeah.
So I almost came across as a spoiled child. That you were too privileged. You were too. Your parents were too lenient. And all that. And that also kind of affected, or kind of shaped our parenting skills, because we then had to come to a middle ground that worked for our children, especially when you're raising them in this part of the world.
Yes.
A lot of the norms about parenting in Africa do not form a healthy parenting in here, in this environment.
No, it doesn't.
So we've had to readjust. And that is where compromise comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
So we cannot, no matter how far gone we are in our marriages or how early we are in the, without that word compromise, a lot of homes will break down, because we all came into, like you said, rightly said, we had our own ideologies before we came into this relationship.
Yeah.
And it's just the healthy thing to do is to build a new common ground between you and your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
We could pick a few good things from our parenting, from our parents' marriages.
Yes.
But we cannot just, literally come in with their notion of marriage.
Copy and paste, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because there are two different combinations behind you. Your spouse, the two spouses have their own setup. So if both of you are just copying and pasting from, that's a mess.
It is a mess.
What works from there, what you think are good qualities, and then build yours with your spouse. And that's what we've had to do. But it's been a painstakingly kind of long journey.
Yeah.
Because when you're from a more liberal background and you're trying to convince somebody who literally went through a certain way where everything's this and that, it's like, just a waiting game. Waiting for that to catch into fact that it's not because I don't want to discipline these children or I don't want them to be this way. I just think this way works better, especially when they're in an environment where they're more open to discuss and express their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
We were meant to be seen and not heard in most homes. In my generation back home in Nigeria, children were meant to be seen and not heard. In my home, we were heard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, when you say that in this environment, it's million miles away from where we grew up, million miles away. The times are different. Locationally, I mean, we're very different. I mean, even in the UK, they had, a completely different set of family values, when we were younger, even here in this part of the world, to what we have now,
Yeah.
So I love that. Okay. We have run out of time.
Yes, we have.
We have run out of time.
It's been an interesting session.
It has been.
And we hope to pick it up and continue next time, because there's still a few other areas. We've only literally talked about your perception of parenting before you got married and the reality of parenting after you got married.
Absolutely.
We'll hopefully in the next series, we will talk about, or the next episode, we should probably go into other key areas that affect marriage, like finance.
I think it's
like
important.
your faith, those
Absolutely.
core values that we've been talking about. And hopefully in time, we'll also talk about some of the good to haves that are not necessarily deal breakers, but you can, when you see those traits, you can still say, okay, I'm willing to work with that. But on the overall, I'll just put this one sentence out. Please do not go into a relationship with the mind to change the core values in your partner. If they haven't got them when you met them, they're not going to change them after you've met them.
Absolutely. Because we are hardwired to these things most of the time. So it's almost impossible to actually say you're going to change the person's, perspective on that, especially on those kind of like core issues.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Okay, so definitely, I think you're absolutely right. Next time we meet, we will carry on with this. There's no real need to rush away from this particular area. We've touched on maybe a fraction, just a little snippet of what we could really cover and do this justice. So we will pick up from here when we meet next time.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so until then, it's goodbye from me and from Olu. Thank
you for listening again. Have
Absolutely.
a great one.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening. All the very best. Bye from now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.